Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Knicks Film School Pregame Show. My name is Andrew Claudio, a.k.a. GMAC. It is time to preview another Knicks matchup, this time on Tuesday night against the Dallas Mavericks. The Knicks come in at 44-26, 4-4 without Jalen Brunson. You would think they were 0-8 by the fan base reaction and consternation. Look, it's not pretty. They currently sit with a 2.8 net rating, which is about 11th in the NBA. This is the without Jalen Brunson portion of the schedule. That it's actually they're about a 500 team without Jalen Brunson, which is not what you want to be, especially with the expectations on this season as they're riding out the string. They have 12 games left. 6-6 would get them to 50 wins, which would be their second consecutive 50-win season. The first time they would have done that since the mid-90s. But I'm with you, Knicks fans. We're riding out the dog days of March, as they call it in the NBA, and they welcome in a Dallas Mavericks team that I can imagine their fan base also wishes they had Jalen Brunson, may also wish they had somebody else as well. And we'll talk about it with, listen, we've gone to the All-City Network a few times this year. We went to Denver and talked to DNVR. We went to Chicago and talked to the CHGO guys over there. Welcome to the Knicks Film School Podcast from the DLLS Mavs Network, or Mavs Podcast. Mr. Kevin Gray. Kevin, welcome to Knicks Film School, sir.
Andrew, appreciate the invite, and I'm sure you're referring to Quentin Grimes, right?
Obviously.
That's right. That's what I figured.
Listen, we obviously have other stuff to talk about today. How are you experiencing the Quentin Grimes thing going on? The same, like, because as Knicks fans, the guys who drafted him, we're watching this like we knew there was more. We didn't know there was this, and I have no idea what to equate this as. How are you experiencing this?
I mean, odd, I guess, would be the word I would use. I mean, he's taking full advantage of the unexpected opportunities that he's got in Philadelphia, given their injury situation and how much you want to talk about a season from hell. The 76ers have been experiencing that, as well. So, I mean, we've seen flashes of this from Quentin Grimes in terms of his ability to, knock down some open jumpers, knock down threes, put the ball on the deck on a little bit. But taking it to the level that he's taking it to since he's got to Philadelphia, no one, I think, in their right mind was expecting Quentin Grimes to do some of the things that he's been doing. But give him a lot of credit. He's balling out in a contract year. He's going to be a restricted free agent this summer. So he's making himself some money, whether he stays in Philadelphia or he goes somewhere else for sure.
That's the one thing we did here in New York, that especially when the Knicks signed DiVincenzo, like Jalen Brunson's old roommate, Grimes lost his starting spot. Then the Knicks consolidated, traded Emmanuel Quickley and RJ Barrett for OG Anunoby, and it was looked at that this would be his chance to earn a sixth man spot and really step up. Then Deuce McBride rose to prominence here in New York, and Grimes lost a bit of favor with the head coach, Tom Thibodeau. And he was looking to go to a different place because recognizing restricted free agency was a year and a half away, which is why seeing what he is now with the Sixers, I have no idea how real it is. I saw the George Niang hot mic the other day where he said if Joel's here or Maxey were here, you would be standing in the corner. Yeah. Recognizing, though, he's made himself some money. I have no idea how much money. As a Knicks fan that hopes all bad things happen to the Philadelphia 76ers, I hope they max him out in restricted free agency in a couple months. But that's former Mavs and former Knicks. And unfortunately, I'm going to bring up a former Mav eventually. I promise you I'm going to go easy because I'm sure you're tired of talking about it at this point. Which is why I'll go to Jalen Brunson first, if that's
there we
okay.
go. Yeah.
So we're experiencing life without Jalen Brunson, and it's just been awful. These last 8 games, they're struggling to score. The Knicks are 25th in offense over their last 8 games without Jalen Brunson. They are up there in defense. They're around 8th or 9th, I believe, in defense. So their defense has gotten better, but as I said in the intro, they're about a 500 team. Tim McMahon, friend of the pod, he actually just came on the show yesterday, has an excerpt in his new book about the Wonder Boy, which, again, we will get to the Wonder Boy. But there's a lot about how things ended in Dallas with Brunson and him not getting the 4 for 55, him having that clause that allowed him to be unrestricted, which then led to him going to New York. This being your first time at Knicks Film School, when they lost Brunson, like did you ever foresee, like, let me get your perspective, that they lost a potential MVP candidate and not just like the second to Luka, the other great ball handler. Did you see any of this potentially happening?
Yeah, I mean, I'd be lying to you if I thought I saw an MVP candidate in Jalen Brunson and seeing him go to New York, and that would be the trajectory that he would be on. I mean, he had turned himself into a terrific number 2 option. You saw what he did in the playoffs against Utah, keeping the Mavericks afloat until Luka Doncic came back. And by that time, you know, he had played himself into a situation where he was going to be earning a lot of money, whether it was staying with Dallas or going somewhere else. And Jason Kidd, throughout the course of that year, he said, one of the things I want to do is I want to get Jalen Brunson paid. Now, being in a Mavericks uniform by the time the end of the season came around. But as that year went on, once he wasn't traded, he became that much more of a focal point in that offense and really showed the one-on-one ability. Nights where he had to put the Mavericks offense on his back when Luka was missing games, and then culminating that in the playoffs. Jalen Brunson turned himself into a terrific player, which is ironic because, you know, before Jason Kidd got there, Rick Brunson. Jalen Brunson had played himself, made himself pretty much unplayable in the Clippers series.
Yeah.
Where Rick Carlisle, you know, eventually, you know, decided to move on and go to Indiana. So the fact that he had that kind of turnaround the following year and then be able to put himself in position to get that kind of contract is just a testament to him. He's always been a winner, whether he was at Villanova, when at the time got to, you know, second round pick with Dallas. And the situation with New York, I mean, between the family ties with the Rose family, obviously his father having worked for Tibbs and then going back there to work for him in New York. I mean, it made for a perfect situation. And I don't know if the amount, even if the amount of money, because the Mavericks, I believe, could offer him at that time, I believe, $175 million to stay in Dallas. It was like a 5-year, $175 million deal to stay there. The pull of going home, being on the East Coast, playing, you know, for the Knicks with all the connections. I don't know if the Mavericks would have been able to overcome it, even with the amount of money that's on the table, in my opinion. Now, maybe money talks, and maybe that 175 would have been like, yeah, actually, I'll go ahead and stay here and do that. But there was just so much going for New York in that situation that clearly it was the right decision that he made.
Yeah, the unknown of what happens if they give him the max is obviously one we're happy in New York that we never got to find out the answer to that. Him taking this extension that he took makes me wonder what his potential answer would have been. How much was the ties to go to New York and be the guy? Like, how much did that matter more to him? So I look, far be it for me to get inside the brain of Jalen Brunson. I only get to know him from afar, of course, although we do get this podcast where we get to hear his edited thoughts, is what I'll say, with his friend Josh Hart. But that's I think the part of this that never gets calculated when talking about the Brunson Dallas thing is the Knicks came here, or he came here to the Knicks, and the Knicks said, all right, so how many college buddies do you want? Like, you want Josh Hart, you got him. You want DiVincenzo, you got him. You want Mikal Bridges, you got him. It was only after they got Mikal Bridges that they then decided to trade for Karl Anthony Towns, and it cost them Dante. But like, you want your dad to be the assistant coach, you got it, you know? So yeah, it's been a family affair here in New York for sure. I think the interesting thing from a Dallas perspective is that I love Jalen Brunson. He's changed the franchise. We've looked at, he's been our Derek Jeter as far as I'm concerned, that humble superstar that has just redefined the culture in the face of a franchise. But then Dallas goes and gets Kyrie, and then they're in the finals the very next year, and it feels like they were able to overcome that fumble by, you know, making up for it, failing upward, if you want to call it that, doing what they did at the end of the 2023 season, which we obviously felt a certain way about because we had the pick, but be able to stay in the top 10 and get the Derek Lively draft pick. I guess this is where we just go into the Luka conversation. And so let me ask this. What are you tired of talking about? I actually want to give the floor to you. What part of the Luka Doncic trade are you like this whole last 6 or 7 weeks? What is like the question you're tired of hearing?
Oh, man. I mean, honestly, I guess I'll work backwards. Like, the one thing that I've continued to be floored about is that they actually traded him.
Okay,
like
that had happened at all. Okay,
that had happened at all. Like, the fact that we're 6+ weeks out from it actually happening, I think is still rather jarring. Every time I see him in a Lakers uniform and, the exploits that he's had so far, it's just still, the word I would use is jarring every time I see it, because it's just not something that you would think especially after coming off of a finals run. You mentioned, the partnership with Kyrie Irving. That did not get off to a good start when Kyrie got here. I mean, they went 5-11 when they played together. And as you mentioned with the pick that the Mavericks kept, strategically not winning games, if you will, in the final couple of games of the regular season that year. And then to turn that around, and a team that was middling around 500 by the time they got to the trade deadline, acquiring PJ Washington, acquiring Daniel Gafford, and the defense turning around for this team, and then the Luka Kyrie partnership just taking off. And then less than a year later to move on from him is still has deeply wounded Mavericks fans quite a bit. So I would say the part that I'm most tired of talking about is, the reasons why reportedly that the team moved off of him, because no matter how they have been explained or couched, they will never make sense to me, because I mean, the hardest part in the NBA is to find one of those guys, one of those generational superstars that can give you a runway for 10, 12 years and put you in position to compete for championships. And the Mavericks got to that in 6.5 years with a guy who he's just now turned 26, last month, but in his age 24 year took you to an NBA finals. Yeah. That doesn't happen very often. So
when you look at the history of the league and the way that the guy has gotten to all these teams, a lot of it has happened through the draft. Some teams have, gotten lucky with the number 1 pick and they get their guy. Some have gotten the number 2 or 3 or 4 pick, and they're lucked out that the guy that they wanted wasn't the guy. Like you look at the Thunder when they took Kevin Durant, like that was the Greg Oden draft from what I remember. And you look at the Luka draft, and the Mavericks not only got lucky in that Luka didn't go 1 or 2, but they also were able to make a trade with Atlanta to get the guy at number 3. And like sometimes you go out of the box to get lucky. Look at Denver, a guy that changed their franchise and might be top 10 ever, was drafted during a Taco Bell commercial. The Knicks needed to do all their stuff, and I'm obviously putting Jalen Brunson in that conversation because I'm biased, but like he's been our version of that, and they had to get creative with a second-round pick eventually coming to the team and taking a leap. For the Lakers to now get their guy because of a creative cup of coffee, that all Rob Pelinka had to do was just say, yeah, sure. Yeah. Yeah, totally. Like there's just I don't hear the reason to say no yet. Just continues to blow my mind as well. The angle that I'm curious about, because again, DLLS Mavs, you guys don't really talk about it anymore. Like the fact that the fallout from the trade, and like there's a play-in race that they're now in. Anthony Davis came back last night. They're in this race with the Kings and the Phoenix, who they don't have the tiebreaker with, but all 3 teams have 35 wins. Like there is a chance that the Mavs can still make the play-in. Have you sensed that Mavericks fans have been able to move back to basketball, want to just move back to basketball, or is there still like entirely too much hurt from the fact that Luka Donic got traded?
I would say there's still plenty of hurt from the trade. And, the fact that not only has the team moved on from Luka Doncic, the amount of injuries that the team has suffered in the wake of that trade. And even before that, Derek Lively had the ankle fracture back on January 14th. So even prior to Luka Doncic hurting his calf, on the Christmas Day game, and then that being the lasting image that we have him in the Mavericks uniform, to, Kyrie Irving tearing the ACL and all the things that have happened since then, we still have the fact that April 9th is coming up, which is when Luka Doncic and the Lakers return to Dallas. So there has not been able to be a complete healing yet, if there ever will be, because, that's right, he still has to make his return to Dallas and do so within the same, year that he was traded. So I think it'll take quite some time for Mavericks fans for some of them to get over it. For some, they won't ever get over it, because you had a bridge from Dirk to Luka that is very rare in sports. And to have a guy play 21 years and then bridge to a young man who spent the first 6.5 years of his career here. And then they actually had a year that they played together. So you had a real natural passing of the torch from Dirk to Luka, to where you felt like Luka was going to take it for the next 10, 12 years himself and eclipse Dirk and the accomplishments that he had, for all that to be just ripped away because my man either drank a little too much beer, smoked a little too much hookah in the eyes of the general manager, is something that is still very, very painful for Mavericks fans at this point.
So I do want to talk about the game. I promise you, I do want to talk about this game tonight, but obviously this is the lead story in Mavericks land from an outsider's perspective is what happened with Luka. But more specifically, like, there's this Twitter account going around. I'm not sure if you've seen it. Is Nico Harrison a bitch today? And I just, every time it's the answer is yes every day. And
that's right.
I laugh at it every time I see a different version of it, where it's like a screenshot of Luka Doncic's stat line with the Lakers last night. And to your point, by the way, when the day that Jalen Brunson got hurt, was against the Lakers, and Luka's playing on the Lakers, and the Knicks unfortunately blew a late fourth quarter lead. They're in overtime, and Luka hits the first 7 points, and I'm just staring at, why are we playing against Luka Doncic right now? Like, I have the same reaction every single time I see him in a Lakers uniform. But
that was a hell of a game, by the way. That was a hell of a game. I watched that game from start to finish. That was a hell of a basketball game between the Knicks and the Lakers that night.
I've been told by many people that are outside of the New York area that it was a great game as well, that they enjoyed said matchup. I was sweating it out in overtime on a West Coast game. So for me, it was 1 a.m. But I agree. Good basketball around. Knicks have been a lot of good basketball games. Texas villains, and more specifically, Dallas villains. Again, outsider's perspective. So I came up with some names that I want you to tell me if Nico Harrison, I mean, like, how I'm assuming Nico's like launched to the top and he's number 1, but like, does A-Rod enter the conversation as like the second most, or Terrell Owens, or like any of the like LeBron and Dwayne Wade, or like DeAndre Jordan from that stretch? Where he didn't go to the Mavericks, and there was that where he agreed to go to the Mavericks and then went back to the Clippers. Like, am I hitting on some of the names that even come close to Nico Harrison, are still ahead of Nico Harrison? Who would you say, like, is he officially the number 1 villain in Dallas sports history?
For some, he has ascended to number 1, which is hard because Jerry Jones still is running around. So
that's actually a good question. I wanted to know the relationship that Jerry has with this. I don't know if he's like beloved for being the Cowboys owner or not, and how open he is, or the inverse of because I didn't know if like the Cowboys villain is mostly their coaches, Mike McCarthy, Jason Garrett, what have you.
No, it's definitely Jerry, because he is the one that's been the ringleader, as the owner, president, and general manager, last 30 plus years. His son, Steven, you could put up high on that list as well, because the lack of championship success that the team has had. Texas is a football state. So as much as they love their basketball, football is number 1 in terms of a sport. Baseball is right up there as well. But the Rangers have won a World Series within the last couple of years. So Rangers fans are, they're doing okay right now. So and the Stars, to their credit, they've been hanging around. They won, of course, a Stanley Cup in '99. They've been hanging around in terms of the Stanley Cup final during, COVID year. They've been Western Conference Finals last few years. So the Rangers and the Stars, they're good around here right now. The Cowboys and now the Mavericks with Nico Harrison. Nico Harrison, in a lot of ways, for a lot of Mavericks fans and DFW sports fans, become public enemy number 1, which is, again, very hard to do when Jerry Jones is in the same GM airspace, if you will, as Nico Harrison.
Do you get the sense amongst the fan base in particular that they're able to compartmentalize, and maybe this might be a bad thing for the Mavs, that it's like, well, like you said, the Rangers won the World Series, spring training's around the corner. I hate to say this as a Mets fan, but DeGrom is coming back this year. Should be there full strength.
All right, let's relax for a second. You got Juan Soto. You're
not wrong. You're not wrong.
You got the biggest prize in free agency in Juan Soto. I think you're doing all right. Francisco Lindor is back. Like, y'all doing okay. Y'all doing okay.
It's purely a sentimental thing. I never wanted to see him wear another uniform. The DeGrom thing also takes me back to a time where we only had Jacob DeGrom. So I'm able to appreciate those years of like, hey, we're bad, but we have the best pitcher in baseball right now. Yeah. You are correct, though. Perspective matters. And while I can now look at DeGrom being healthy and root for him because my team has Juan Soto, I'll be okay with that. But are you able to, like, do you sense that Mavericks fans, or specifically Dallas fans, are able to be like, all right, whatever with the Mavericks, I can move on to these other things, which then as a result can be a bad thing for the Mavericks, that they might be like the apathetic part of your fan base is not what you want. You want them to care so much that they're passionate. You rip their heart out, they might like pivot to something else. Do you sense that potentially happening in the fan base?
Honestly, some of it has happened already, to be honest with
geez.
you. Yeah, as far as the the apathy toward the team, not just with the trade, but as I mentioned, with the amount of injuries that this team has dealt with, and then the lack of winning that has happened since the team, traded away Luka. I mean, before, their back-to-back wins over the Pistons and Nets last night, the Mavs were 2-11 in the last 13 games and careening toward a potential top 10 pick. Now with Anthony Davis back, they feel like that they still have a chance to make the play-in, depending on what happens with, Sacramento and Phoenix. But this is a team that for a lot of its fans feel like, what does the future look like? Because as much as, the excitement may be around Anthony Davis returning, you still have to remember that Kyrie Irving's got a torn ACL and may not be back until, this time next year. He still hasn't had, surgery as of yet, based off of what we know right now. So, there are things that that the team is still dealing with to try and put themselves in position to compete for a championship, next year and the year beyond that, because Nico Harrison, with what he has said, is that this is a 3 or 4 year time window that he has for this team to try to win. Kyrie Irving just turned 33. Anthony Davis just turned 32. Klay Thompson just turned 35. Like, they've got older very quickly. So the window has already been lost for this year, most likely already lost for next year, because you're not, in my opinion, you're not winning a championship without Kyrie Irving on the floor. And he won't be there for a majority of the year. And honestly, I mean, as someone who watches and talks about sports the way that you do, it's not the first year that you come back from the ACL. It's the next year that you feel like you're right again. So we're talking about maybe Kyrie Irving at age 35, feeling somewhat like he used to before the ACL. So there's a lot of maneuvering parts for this team that they've got to figure out here over the next 12 to 18 months, because a championship window and runway that they had before with Luka, 10 years or so, they artificially shortened it, to the confusion of a lot of Mavericks fans.
Do you see them potentially making another move? Like the fact that, like you said, they've shortened this window, again, self-inflicted, but the fact that they have so many older players, I say older because I'm going to be 37 and I just don't want to call a 32-year-old old. So I
feel you. I'm 38, so I'm right there with you.
Get it, man.
I'm right there with you.
Kevin Durant can't play into his. How many more years does he have? He's going to be 37. So yeah, I know, a month older than him. I hate when people call him old. Regardless, the fact that they shorten their window and the immediacy is the most important thing. Do you foresee another big move potentially coming? I'm sure by now Nico and Patrick Dumont have sensed that what they did was not the most popular move, and maybe even potentially the wrong move, but another move to potentially fix what they did to even more maximize this current window. Do you see them being aggressive this offseason in that sense?
I mean, it's very possible. I mean, honestly, I don't put anything past the organization after they traded Luka Donic. So, I mean,
good point. Yeah.
Yeah. So if they do not make the play-in, they'll be in the lottery this year. How far they go up will be the question. Obviously, the Mavericks have never moved up in their history in terms of the lottery, which is an odd statistic. But yeah, so there's that, lottery luck for them. But also, there were rumors of, will they go after Kevin Durant? What could they package to potentially, get Phoenix to bite to bring Durant here? I don't know if necessarily that's going to be the case. But at the same time, they've got things to worry about. Kyrie Irving, we mentioned him with the ACL. He's got a $43 million player option this summer that I would imagine he's going to opt out of so that he can get a little bit of a raise, because the leverage that he would have over the Mavericks, even with him coming off the ACL injury, like they made this move to get Anthony Davis to pair alongside Kyrie Irving. So the amount of playmaking and scoring and everything else and facilitation that Kyrie has to do, it's going to put a lot on him. So I'm sure he would want the commensurate raise that would need to come with that. So there's a potential of a new contract for him. AD has a 3-year, $175 million contract extension that kicks in at the beginning of this upcoming season. So you've got those obligations. PJ Washington is contract extension eligible. Daniel Gafford is extension eligible this summer as well. So they've got some things financially that they've got to really consider on how they move. And with the way that the aprons work now, and the first and second apron, you don't obviously want to be near that second apron. They've got to figure out some ways creatively to ensure that they can keep the core of this team together moving forward to give them a chance to win the championships that they believe they can with the roster that they have.
I hear Quentin Grimes is available in restricted free agency. I don't know if that's a potential move.
Okay, so real quick on that. So obviously we've seen what Grimes has done, and one of the things, so in light of the Luka Doncic trade happening, Nico Harrison wanted to get this team as good defensively as it possibly could be, and moving on from Grimes allowed them to get Caleb Martin, who was really good in a defensive role and did what he did with Miami, helping them get to the NBA Finals. But more importantly, he's a cost control player that's only going to be paid, around $7-8 million for the next 3 or 4 years. Quentin Grimes is in a position where he was possibly going to get a contract extension. They did some negotiation, didn't work out for him with the Mavericks. They eventually move on, and they were probably going to have to pay more to keep Quentin Grimes than they would Caleb Martin. So in some ways, a defensive move, but also a financial one as well, because you have a cost control player for the next 3 or 4 years. So they might have dodged a bullet from a financial standpoint with Grimes, but I don't know necessarily from a better player perspective, given what Grimes can be and looks like he's showing right now.
It's the PR side of it, I think. The fact that a month, like honestly, a couple of days after you trade Luka, the guy that you trade Quentin Grimes as well, and then Grimes does this. It's more just the PR. It's starting to pile up that, oh wow, the other move you made is also for a guy averaging 26 a game. However, on a bad team, regardless, I'm sure that's the thing people are more pointing to when it comes to just any chance you could take to take a shot at Nico. People are going to take it
for sure.
Now look, with the roster that's still there as we pivot to tonight's game, so I'm just going to go through the rotation as far as I see it from an outsider's perspective. So I'm assuming the starting 5 tonight with no Anthony Davis playing. We should say that Anthony Davis spoke to Steph Bondy of the New York Post, sent out that like an actual quote. I'm assuming he saw Anthony Davis and he asked, "Are you playing tonight?" And he said, "I don't think so." So Anthony Davis will not play. I'm sure you guys talked about it last night on DLLS.
Right.
That they came back against Brooklyn, so that way he could take tonight off against the Knicks. By the way, weird that ever happens. Usually guys take the Brooklyn game off before they go to play the Knicks because they have to go play at Madison Square Garden. So we were thankful that it happened this way for once. So I'm looking at Spencer Dinwiddie, Klay Thompson, PJ Washington, Kai Jones, and Najee Marshall as your starting 5. Then you go Dwight Powell, Max Christie. Who's the kid? Williams. I'm forgetting his
Brandon Williams.
Brandon. Yeah, I'll say so. Brandon Williams, who's actually he's on a 2-way and he's actually having a pretty decent stretch. Since getting consistent run. They haven't won a ton, as you mentioned. They were 2-11 during the stretch that he largely entered into the rotation after Kyrie got hurt. They may play a 9th guy in Jaden Hardy, but that's the thing I've noticed. And look, as someone who deals with a lot of Knicks fans yelling at Tom Thibodeau going to 8-man rotations, it warmed my heart to go to some box scores and see Jason Kidd doing the same thing. And like, oh, so other teams do that when you're shorthanded. I assume that's going to be the rotation tonight. And when you go to clean the glass and you take off all the injured players, it's not a great net rating, but you do see some good lineups out there. On behalf of Knicks fans that might be worried about the Mavericks coming in on the second night of a back-to-back and playing spoiler in Madison Square Garden, what would you say to them? What is do you think that the Mavericks could potentially come in and play spoiler when it's looked the best during this stretch? How has it looked? What would you say to those Knicks fans?
I would say for the Knicks that they need to ensure that their guys come ready to play. No matter what has been the situation for the Mavericks from a roster standpoint, this team has played hard and it's done so consistently, night in and night out. So even when they've had 7 or 8 guys available, they have brought the energy and brought fight. And if you're not ready to play, you could find yourself not necessarily maybe losing, but in a dogfight that you didn't necessarily expect to be in, given how shorthanded this team is. And you mentioned, Brandon Williams is on two-way. He's been good for them. Kai Jones, who was in the starting lineup last night alongside Anthony Davis, he's been really good for them, averaging nearly a double-double in the time that he's been out there on the floor, providing them some rim running, some athleticism, especially in transition. And Kessler Edwards is another guy that's been part of the rotation for them as well. He's actually going to be playing in his final game tonight on his two-way contract. So he'll still remain with the team as of the moment. He can still practice with them. But as far as the 50 games that he is active and able to play in, tonight would be the last one. And you're right. Anthony Davis said last night he's not going to play tonight. The plan was for Kessler Edwards to play in one of the two games on the back-to-back. That's going to be the game tonight. So he provides them a small ball five that has been improving as a three-point shooter, a guy that brings a lot of energy and activity, on the glass. Smart player, has been able to get more and more opportunities to play well, and he's done that for this team. So they're two-way guys. What has been, a lost season pretty much since, the beginning of February. They're two-way guys, Kessler Edwards, Brandon Williams, but more recently, Kai Jones has been really good for them. So the size that they had last night was honestly the biggest lineup they've been able to put out there really 6 weeks, 7 weeks with Kai Jones and Davis together.
And that's how they want to play, right? Like the fully healthy, optimized version of this team will be as a Knicks fan who remembers the David Robinson, Tim Duncan era, obviously because the Knicks lost to that team in the finals, but like going that big in today's NBA is usually not the plan. Everybody likes to play 5 out, emphasize spacing. And look, that first half that you saw with AD, the first game that he played with the Mavericks, I'm sure I don't have to tell you this. We all kind of saw what the version Nico Harrison thought would exist would be a pretty lethal team from a size perspective.
Yeah,
I'll tell you, Tom Thibodeau would love to coach this team, a team with this much size. They can just lean on rim protection, all this 5 out stuff that he's hating. You could potentially win the battle of the boards. I say all of this because the way that the Mavericks like to play actually leans into the Knicks' biggest weakness to an extent, in that not so much that like the boards are a thing, but that Tibbs like needs Josh Hart out there for as much as possible. One of the best rebounding guards in the sport. We'll throw out these lineups out there with Precious Achiuwa, Josh Hart, and Mitchell Robinson. So you're basically playing with 3 non-shooters. So the paint is basically a phone booth. And so you now play a Mavericks team that may actually be the team to play that big against. I can't tell if it's advantage Knicks or disadvantage Knicks, because these worse lineups are going to potentially be out there, but these are the lineups to play them against when you're so shorthanded. So I say all that to say, Knicks fans, I have no idea what to expect in this matchup tonight against the Mavericks.
Yeah, I mean, the Knicks come into tonight, I believe, a 9.5 point favorite in this game. I mean, the shorthanded nature with the Mavericks are dealing with, even with some of the guys that are playing well, like PJ Washington, example, in his last 4 games since returning from the ankle injury, averaging nearly 25 points per game. He's shooting 57% from the field, over 40% from 3. He's had to become more of a primary scoring option for them, which means the ball has been in his hands a lot more, which has been a turnover problem for him. So he can tend to be turnover prone for this team. So that's something to watch out for. Spencer Dinwiddie has been really good as of late. His last 5 games got an 8-to-1 assist to turnover ratio. He's got 40 assists to just 5 turnovers. In his last 5 games, had a double-double again last night in terms of the points and assists that he had. So Dinwiddie's been playing well as of late. I mean, it's more egalitarian for them. A lot of guys playing a little bit more one-on-one. They're moving the basketball. One of the things that the Mavericks love to do is that when the ball touches the paint and guys are moving, kick out, redrive, be able to try to get themselves downhill to the free throw line. That's kind of when they're at their best, given what they've got available to them. But from a talent standpoint, I mean, the Knicks are overwhelmingly much better than this team, even with, another guy, for example, Najee Marshall in his last 10 games averaged over 22 a game, himself shooting 52%, grabbing 8 boards a night. So they've got guys individually that are playing well. It's just that the collection of talent as a team is just, especially against a team like this in New York, is just not it doesn't stack up the way that it needs to be as competitive as hopefully the Mavericks would be tonight.
So you mentioned Najee Marshall. I heard the
Mm-hmm.
stat that Mark Stein read on your show last night, but over his last 11 games, Najee Marshall 22-8-4. Largely starting too when Anthony Davis wasn't there. Obviously came off the bench last night in Brooklyn. I look at, and look, the way the Mavericks are replacing the offense that you normally get from Kyrie Irving and Anthony Davis and other places. Like you said, it seems like it's a lot of Dinwiddie. It's a lot of pick and roll. It's other guys potentially stepping up. The Knicks are kind of doing the same thing without Jalen Brunson, who soaked up so much usage. And look, one of the worst kept secrets, not just that Jalen Brunson's important, it's that he's the really only ball handler. You know, when he went down, Campaign was the backup point guard. Deuce McBride is largely an off-ball guard. And then Deuce McBride apparently might be out for a couple games with a strained groin. So they're turning to rookie Tyler Kolek, who in New York is the second coming, but in reality is just like a solid, potentially good backup point guard in the future.
Sure.
But I'm looking for how the Knicks can also replace their offense. Since the Luka trade, the Mavericks are 9-14, but they're 20th in offense. The Knicks over that stretch since February 2nd are 21st in offense. Without Jalen Brunson, they're 26th in offense. So it's why it's either going to have to be a lot of shot making on the Knicks side. You mentioned that they're 9-point favorites. They were 11-point favorites against San Antonio and lost last week. They were 11-point favorites against Charlotte and lost last week. They were 16-point favorites against Washington, went up by 31 on Saturday. And then a combination of Marcus Smart and Rashawn Holmes cut that lead to 4 midway through the fourth quarter. And then a very deliberate tanking sub was made to get all the veterans out of the game. And the Knicks were able to push that lead back up to double digits, but they almost covered is my point. I guess what I'm saying is that you speak to a team that's going to bring it and actually has something to play for. It scares some Knicks fans that have just seen the Knicks struggle to replace the offense that not just that Jalen Brunson brings, but that he creates since he's been down. And it's why I'm not counting this as like, oh, good, at least we're playing a bad team or a team that we're a 9-point favorite against tonight. I got a lot of respect for that Mavs team. So we'll see what happens. Can we go to the live chat, if you don't mind, and get some questions from people watching live? So we'll start here with Knicks fan 1992 was 80 playing no. We're thinking no because he said I don't think so. So I will respond with the same thing. I don't. He's not playing. So. From Ben Kim Gervey, what's the end game here? Is it getting casino rights in Texas or moving the team? Is that one of the theories that you're like either tired of hearing or like that like it's that's how crazy the Luka trade was, that it's like this has to be about gambling rights, right?
Well, look, some people will tell you that, you know, the Adelson and Dumont family bought the team as a pawn to get gambling legalized in the state of Texas. They're not moving out of the state of Texas. I mean, we won't get into the conversation about expansion fees and everything else and all the money that the NBA could get from putting a new team in Las Vegas or something like that. They're not moving a team out of a top 5 market just to, you know, to do that. But it's recently, in fact, last week, Irving, the city of Irving, Texas, decided to, you know, have them remove the casino portion of what would be a new resort potentially being, you know, in a stadium being built out in Irving if they were to move out that way. They struck that down and said, hey, get the casino portion out of this. But yeah, there's been a lot of wild theories running around about why they traded Luka. Was this a ploy to get gambling legalized? And look, they've been trying to do that regardless of them owning the Mavericks or whatever the case may be. But no, they're not moving. They're not moving out of Dallas.
Yeah, the Nike part of it is not lost on me. That's one of my favorite theories, that this was a makeup for Kobe. Like they wanted, because it's Pelinka and Harrison who have the ties to Kobe, that they wanted to make good and move Luka to the Lakers. The idea that the Adelsons know that like global warming's worse than it is, and this is like the last year of Earth, and they thought Luka was going to be out for the year, so this was their last chance to move.
That's a new one. I hadn't heard that one. That's a new one. That's a new one.
To your point about like Luka got traded, anything's on the table as far as crazy trades, and that's really what I've seen, is that anybody that used to throw the crazy trade in the group chat
Yeah.
I used to say, no, you're nuts. Now it's like, hey, Luka got traded.
Yeah, anything's possible.
Anything's possible at this point. Juan Soto
yeah.
could sign with the Mets instead of the Yankees. Like anything is possible at this point. I apologize for absolutely nothing, Yankee fans watching. Another one from Ben Kim Gervey. Is there any friction between Kyrie and the Adelsons? I guess this is in reference to obviously what happened with Brooklyn. There was friction between him and the front office, and that led to his departure. Any friction here with him potentially looking for a new contract this upcoming summer?
And I do wonder, and appreciate the question. I do wonder if they're referring to maybe some of the political differences between the Adelson family and Kyrie Irving and their political, thoughts. If if
opinions,
you will.
Beliefs.
Not to my knowledge, no.
Okay.
I mean, Kyrie is cashing a nice check from the Mavericks right now. So the question would be, basketball wise, does he want to continue his career here? Because the Mavs have treated Kyrie extremely well here in Dallas. Even with Luka being gone, Kyrie has been a model citizen here, and he's done everything that they have wanted him to do, and he's been fantastic here. So I don't think that'll have the kind of bearing on it that some folks might think. But it's a legitimate thought and question for sure.
If I could put you on the spot, do you think he'll get a new contract from the Mavericks this offseason?
Yeah.
100%. There's no Paul George chicanery potentially happening.
I don't think so. I mean, the Nets, ironically, are the only team that really has significant cap space to give him the kind of max money that he would be looking for. And other teams have to create significant space, like the Lakers, who have to pretty much gut their team in order to get, Kyrie to make room for, him to come there. So the Mavericks are in a position, they have his bird rights as well, so they can offer him more than anyone in the league. So
it's funny. You mentioned the Lakers would have to gut their team. I don't think Rob Pelinka's good at his job, so I don't necessarily rule that out. We saw 2 days after he traded for Luka, which might be like one of the best trades in NBA history. He then made a bad trade for Mark Williams and needed his medical staff and maybe his scouting department to find a wrinkle to get out of said trade. This is the same guy that traded multiple pieces to a championship team for Russell Westbrook, because now that might be LeBron. Who knows? I don't know the behind the scenes of that.
Yeah.
I'm not going to rule again. Luka got traded. I'm not going to rule out a potential Rob Pelinka go all in for Kyrie this offseason,
Yeah. I mean, and I think that's one of the things that Mavericks fans have lamented about this whole situation was that, okay, fine. You trade Luka Donic. Cool, you got Anthony Davis. You didn't extract the maximum amount of value that you could have gotten if that was the only team that you're gonna negotiate with. You have to get everything, and I mean everything that you possibly can. I'm talking about every first round pick and swap for the next 3-4 years. Anthony Davis, Max Christie. Yeah, you can throw Dalton Connect over here as well. We'll try for Austin Reeves. I'll understand if you don't want to throw him in there, but Dalton Connect at minimum needs to come over here too. So
Kevin, there's no if you don't want to throw Austin Reeves in. I have Luka. If you want Luka, whatever you want, I can get from you. Austin Reeves is in that deal, so I'm with you on the extract as much as you can. You're supposed to have the power in that situation.
Yeah, if I'm Nico Harrison, I'm trying to get everything that I can. I'm gonna ask for anything. I mean, you already given me Anthony Davis, so what else do you want in exchange for this guy that I'm about to
look? Ohtani has to play a month for the Rangers. I'm we get Jared Goff. I guess Jared Goff is technically in Detroit. We get Matthew Stafford to play quarterback for the Cowboys for a month. The Oscars are now being hosted in Dallas instead of LA. All the bargaining chips are now in Dallas. If you want,
everything's on the table. Everything's on the table,
at least. So last question. This is more to the point of the reaction from the fan base that I've seen from Cardiac Knicks, who always has some interesting comments in our chat. Why are Mavs fans still showing up for games? Y'all should 100% be boycotting the freaking franchise. So pain is a especially sports pain is a thing. I guess my question really just goes to how long do you think this will take to heal? Will this ever heal in Dallas?
For some, it will never heal for them, just because not only the player that they traded, but the manner in which he was traded. I mean, traded in the middle of the night with no warning. No one had any idea that this was coming. and it has upended a franchise and a fan base that has seen a superstar build his entire career. I'm talking about Dirk here now, on the idea that loyalty never fades away, and the idea that the Mavericks would just cut off a player's trajectory, not only after winning the NBA or reaching the NBA Finals, but had given no indication that he wanted to leave. He had just bought a home, was in the process of closing on a home to be here for the long term. And one of the things you'll learn about Luka Doncic as the years go on is that he's a very loyal individual. And once he is at a place, he is going to do everything that he can to make that work. And, he will not get the chance for that because the Mavericks didn't necessarily want to be in the business of Luka Doncic anymore. So fans are very, very upset still. As I mentioned earlier, April 9th is still coming. When the trade was initially, made, there were protests outside of the American Airlines Center where the Mavericks play here in Dallas. Obviously, there was incidents where fans were getting kicked out by, Mavericks staff and personnel because of Fire Nico chants. Fire Nico chants have swept the country. Like whether it's in DFW or around the country, we got people chanting Fire Nico at college basketball games, hockey games, Medieval Times, which is a restaurant, cosplay situation. It's just random. It's just wherever it is. And folks are not thrilled with Nico Harrison. So yeah, there's still a lot of fans who have a lot of passion and fervency about the way they feel about this team. I think it'll reach a fever pitch on April 9th, because to see him in that uniform in this building after the way things have gone down, yeah, we're expecting a apoplectic potential type of day in Dallas.
This may put you on the spot in an unfair spot, but I'll tiptoe to. Do you see what's the bandwidth for Nico there long term? Like, Lakers win the finals this year, make the finals this year with Luka. Is there any world where Nico's not the GM of the team next year, or not in charge of the team, or with the Mavericks next year? Do you think they made this decision, they've backed him on it, he's here for a while now?
Yeah, I don't see him going anywhere in the foreseeable future. I mean, the Dumont family is not a team that really knew about basketball or really sports all that much in general. So they put
from their public comments, that shows, by the way.
Exactly. They put their complete trust in Nico Harrison to run this team as the president and general manager. And honestly, with them acquiring Anthony Davis, you have to see a decent portion of that through before you make the decision to move on from him. But yeah, if the Lakers, if they reach the Western Conference Finals, or heaven forbid they make the NBA Finals this year, I mean, yeah, it's already the worst trade. It was already the worst trade in NBA history when it was made. If the Lakers, just for conversation's sake, somehow find a way to the finals and win the thing, yeah, it's the worst trade maybe in sports history. Shout out to Babe Ruth and the Red Sox and the Yankees. Like that's the kind of levels that we're talking about here.
So you bring up Babe Ruth. This is baseball bona fides here. They sold Babe Ruth to the Yankees. So technically it wasn't even a trade, which then launches Luka to the top of the list almost immediately, So we're
not financing Broadway plays around here.
Exactly. No Nanette is not showing in Dallas all of a sudden.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
And look, that's the night of the trade. So I do work with Sam Vecini over on his show Game Theory, and I was just one of the few people, because the Knicks had just lost to the Lakers, who were then getting Luka Doncic hours after the game, the night that the Luka trade happened, and we were doing our post game. So we had a outing in New York City when the trade happened, and we were in the middle of wrapping up our remote, and I was getting ready to start tearing stuff down, and then we're staring at the alert. Like, this is a joke of some kind. Like, it's the first ever Shams got hacked. Like, this is so not real. We don't believe the internet thing. And so I went on with Sam once I got home from the event, and we did our reactions, and I wanted to be like, this is the worst trade I've ever seen, right? And he was like, there's stuff we don't know. Let's give it a day or two. Let's give them the benefit of the doubt that they have more information than us. Within 24 hours, it was like, oh no, you were right. This is one of the worst trades in sports, maybe basketball history. They don't know more than us. They think that they won the trade. which is the weird perspective of this. It's not just that they traded him. It's that they think they won the trade by trading him. And every public comment has reflected that. And look, this is where the empathetic side of me comes out. I couldn't imagine being a fan of a team with that being in charge of the team that I root for, so it's weird. There was this fun little Dallas, New York rivalry from the time the Porzingis trade happened. And now I've gone the complete other way where I'm just like, I'm kind of rooting for the Mavericks to make the play in. I just want good things to happen to that fan base. That's just an awful thing that got done to them. But now, I have an empathetic side of me,
That has been one of the, I guess, good and weird parts about all this is the amount of empathy that folks have had outside of our own fan base have had toward the organization or toward fans of the team. Man, look, I'm so sorry. Like your team. I think, but it's a recognition of just how difficult it is to find a player of that caliber and then to essentially give him away again. And this is no disrespect to Anthony Davis, who is a top 75 player, NBA champion, going to be a Hall of Famer, one of the best defensive centers, of our generation, but he's not that guy,
right?
Who was drafted, led the team to a finals and had become a part of the fabric of not just obviously the team and the fan base, but really is a part of, DFW sports. And for that to be, ripped away when you had thought you were going to see another 10 years of it. Yeah, it's tough. So, but we appreciate. Thank you. We appreciate the empathy from all of you. Thank you very much.
Yes, exactly. Thoughts and prayers. Yeah,
yes.
It's weird to be saying that because it's sports, but still,
right.
it's warranted at this point. What's also warranted is the praise that I give to the DLLS crew because you guys do a great job over there. Over at DLLS Mavs, in particular, you, Tim Cato, friend of the pod. Mark Stein, who's a friend of the Substack, he plugs Knicks Film School Substack a bunch, and then Bobby, who I enjoy when he gets going. That's for sure. Kevin, before you get out of here, I basically just did it, but thank you for joining me here at Knicks Film School. Anything else you want to plug before you get out of here to the fine folks at home?
Well, thank you so much for having me. Really appreciate it. Yeah, you can find me on X at Kevin Gray Sports. And, of course, we do our DLLS Mavs podcast 5 times a week. We do pregame shows, postgame shows as well. Got a lot of terrific content. As you mentioned, my teammates Bobby Corella, Tim Cato is our beat writer for the Mavericks, of course. The incomparable Mark Stein, who's been covering this league for 30-plus years. We're so happy to have him on our team, providing us insights, whether it's the Mavericks or across the league. So I get to be kind of the maestro and, play point guard and let these guys cook. I offer my thoughts as well on this team. So it's a pleasure to work with not only those guys, but the entirety of our All-City network. So we've got a really good thing going, and we're just getting started. So it's been a weird rise to the kind of status that we have, are starting to move ourselves toward because of the whole Luka Donic trade. But at the same time, we still have a team that is one of the most talked about in the league. So I'm happy to be a part of what we've got going, and hopefully better times are around the corner for us in this franchise for sure.
I was telling you before we started, I discovered you guys. Obviously, I knew about All City because of the other pregame pods that we've done, but I discovered you guys the night of the Luka trade, and the ability to analyze it and every angle of it was impressive, but also the pure emotion that came out of it has kept me coming back. So I highly recommend any Knicks fan. We do it. I will say this is a thing that normally happens with our audience is that I say, hey, Knicks win tonight, go invade their post game, which obviously is good for your metrics, but also may welcome a lot of Knicks fans and New Yorkers to your post game show after a W. Shout out to the it's weird. The Knicks have had like a fun season in that like the Sixers are bad. The Heat are bad. The Nets are bad, but not bad enough, which makes it even funnier. And so like laughing at our enemies has actually been a good thing. But as I mentioned, it's like we almost want to come over if the Knicks win tonight and say, hey, good game. Like we know you're going through something right now in Dallas. So regardless, go invade the DLLS Mavs post-game show and subscribe to their channel, subscribe to their podcast. You know what to do, Knicks fans. Take care of the people that make time for us. Kevin, it was great to talk to you. Thank you for joining me today.
You got it, Andrew. Appreciate the time, my man. Thank you.
Of course. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in to another edition of the Knicks Film School Pregame Show. We do this before every game. If you dug it, please head over to iTunes, drop a 5-star rating and a review. If you're watching on YouTube, like this video. Remember to subscribe. A reminder, we're doing another watch party this Friday at T-Squared Social in New York City. The Knicks will play the Milwaukee Bucks at 8 o'clock. I've mentioned baseball a couple times. The Mets will be playing at 8 o'clock as well, so come watch that. The Sweet 16 will be on, so hang out on a Friday night, end the work week with us at T-Squared Social. I will actually be back, not tomorrow for the Clippers game, because I am going on the Clips and Dip podcast. We're doing a home and home and completing the Clippers preview by going over there. So make sure you subscribe to their channel. I will be back on Friday to preview that matchup against the Bucks. But until next time, thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. Enjoy the game tonight, and I'll speak with you soon. Peace.